From the outset, Vesalius proved himself a master. In the search for real knowledge, he risked the most terrible dangers, and especially the charge of sacrilege, found upon the teachings of the Church for ages. Through this sacred conventionalism, Vesalius broke without fear, despite ecclesiastical censure, great opposition in his own profession, and popular fury. He studied his science by the only method that could give useful results. The idea that the medieval church opposed the practice of human dissection has been popular for a long time. The church, due to its supposed view of the human body as the temple of the soul, should have found the practice of dissection unacceptable, and thereby hindered advancement in medical science for centuries. In this video we will examine this claim, but before we do that, a short background history of the practice of human dissection is needed. Until the 13th century, human dissection was not practiced with any regularity in Europe. In the ancient Greek and Roman world, cutting up human bodies was highly discouraged and in many places illegal due to ancient cultural taboos and traditions proclaiming that dead bodies were ritually unclean. Human dissection were not practiced with any regularity during the early Middle Ages either, and this was mostly due to the general undeveloped state of medical learning in Western Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire, where medical teaching and research of all sorts reached a low ebb. However, this started to change in northern Italy towards the end of the 13th century, where the practice of human dissection started to emerge in the medical faculties at the newly founded universities. Many modern scholars think that this was partly due to the city of Bologna's preeminent position as a place for the study of law, and several of the first dissections is likely to have been post-mortem examinations intended to ascertain the cause of death for legal purposes. These autopsies broke with the earlier taboos against cutting up human bodies, and shortly afterwards the medical faculty at Bologna was carrying out dissections as part of the doctor's training. However, around this time the advance in medical science is supposed to have been met with hard resistance from the medieval church, due to its supposed commitment to the sacredness of the human body. Proponents of this thesis has historically presented two papal bulls from the High Middle Ages in attempts to show this. The first one is the papal bull known as the Church abhors the shedding of blood, which forbade Catholic priests and clergy from practicing surgery involving burning or cutting, and the bull known as of detestable cruelty, which forbade a contemporary funerary practice that involved cutting up the corpse and boiling the flesh off the bones, in order to make it easier to transport it for distant burial, a process that had gained currency among European crusaders in the Holy Land. So, do these papal bulls demonstrate a hostility of the medieval church towards human dissection? Well, let's go over each of the bulls at a time. For a start, the bull known as the Church abhors the shedding of blood obviously don't. While there were in fact several decrees forbidding clerics from practicing any form of surgery involving burning or cutting, these reflect concerns that the clergy might put people's lives in danger for pecuniary reasons, and has nothing whatsoever to do with dissection. The second bull, known as of detestable cruelty, is a bit more complex than the first one. Although there is no evidence that the medieval church had a practicing of human dissection in mind when issuing the bull, it nonetheless had an indirect impact on the study of anatomy in some places in medieval Europe. This was mostly the case with some anatomists in Northern Europe who interpreted the bull categorically, either as forbidding dissection or forbidding dissection without papal dispensation. In Western and Southern Europe, the bull was interpreted literally, as in forbidding removing the flesh from a dead corpse by boiling it, and therefore had nothing to do with human dissection. Anatomists like the French surgeon Guy de Chauliac in the early 14th century showed no hesitation about practicing human dissection, and he was not persecuted for it by ecclesiastical authorities, as were no one else during the Middle Ages. As historian of science and leading expert in medieval medicine Catherine Park says. Crucially, avoidance of dissection seemed to have reflected preemptive caution on the part of anatomists, rather than actual ecclesiastical pressure. I know of no case in which an anatomist was ever prosecuted for dissecting a human cadaver, and in no case in which the church ever rejected a request for dispensation to dissect. Now, despite there being no evidence that the medieval church opposed human dissection, the practice of dissection in late medieval Europe was in fact limited, and this was mainly due to the lack of human cadavers that anatomists were allowed to dissect, which prompted some anatomy students to grave robbing, which was something that was forbidden by both secular and ecclesiastical authorities. For example, in year 1319, 4 medical students at the University of Bologna were prosecuted by the city for exhuming and dissecting the corpse of a criminal who had been executed earlier that day. This hampering of human dissection resulted not from religious prohibition, but due to cultural sensitivities concerning who was and was not appropriate for being subject to dissection. To be exhibited naked in front of a group of university students was seen as a deeply shaming prospect by medieval and Renaissance people, particularly since dissection rendered the body unsuited for a funeral, where the corpse was usually transported on an open bier. Municipalities responded to these concerns by restricting dissection to the bodies of foreigners, often defined as those born at least 40 miles away, who presumably had no family members on the scene to be dishonored. So in conclusion is the claim that the medieval church opposed human dissection just a false story, that has little to do with actual history. Before I end the video, I think it's appropriate to dispel the most common heroic tale concerning this myth, and that is the tale of Leonardo da Vinci. It's commonly thought that Da Vinci performed his anatomical research in a church basement, with secret exits, and invented mirror reading to be able to hide his results in fear of ecclesiastical persecution. This heroic tale was made up by the 19th century anti-Christian historian Andrew Dickson White, and like the claim that the medieval church prohibited human dissection, it does not reflect actual history. In fact, Leonardo never got in trouble for practicing human dissection, though his difficulty in obtaining human corpses forced him to rely largely on animal cadavers. This difficulty related not to religious restrictions, but mostly due to the fact that Da Vinci was an artist with no medical training and no institutional credentials to legitimize his work. If you are interested in doing your own research, which is something I highly recommend, the literature used in this video can be found in the video description. I also strongly recommend that you read the article Debunking a Myth, which is an interview by Professor Katharine Park, and share it the next time someone presents the myth that the medieval church opposed the practice of human dissection. And don't forget that if you like this video and want to see more videos like it, hit the like, share and subscribe buttons.